We take a single episode of a science fiction TV series and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. This is the Fusion Patrol Podcast. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Simon.
And tonight we're looking at the Doomwatch episode, By the Pricking of My Thumbs. In a secondary school, some students sabotage another student's science experiment, making it so that it will explode. The results go pretty much exactly how any rational person would expect them to go. The student is burned and has glass lodged in his eye. At Doomwatch, Dr. Chantry is helping visiting scientist, Mr. Ensor, do chromosomal studies. It's clear Quist isn't a big fan of this project and believes Ensor is making too much from his extremely limited data. Ensor is studying the effects of men possessing double Y chromosomes and how that influences their violent behavior. Chantry is helping him study blood samples taken from prisoners. At the school, the three boys are on the carpet, and while only two of them were actually active in sabotaging the experiment, all three stick together and will not rat on one another. The victim faces the potential loss of his eye, and the perpetrators face expulsion. Ensor is there too, and after the boys leave, he begins expounding on the fruits of his work, and that in light of who one of the three students is, Stephen Franklin, an adopted child, it may make sense. Unbeknownst to Ensor or the headmaster, Stephen was the one child who did not actively participate in the prank. When the two culprits are given an essay on environment versus heredity as their punishment, but Stephen is expelled from school, Stephen's father is irate. He pieces together that somehow the school is assuming that Stephen has double Y chromosomes and is, in effect, predisposed to violence and bad behavior, and therefore must have been the instigator of the prank. Mr. Franklin also happens to be a journalist, and through the wildest of coincidences, happens to have written several articles popularizing the view that double Y chromosomes lead to violent individuals. He takes his plight to Doomwatch. Quist knows of Mr. Franklin, and he does not appreciate a journalist who simplifies scientific data to the point where it is easily misunderstood by the layman, and he has no sympathy for him. Ridge, meanwhile, through his constant sexual activity, has discovered that the blood samples Chantry has been analyzing aren't from prisoners, but happen to be samples extracted from students at Stephen's school, where Ensor has been carrying on his research. This angers Chantry, who has been lied to, but it softens Quist's heart. Just a little. There's still one mysterious question. Ensor hasn't gotten around to taking blood samples from the older students yet. How does he seem to know that Stephen is double Y? Quist puts Ridge on the case. Ridge puts Hardcastle on the case, who has apparently been hiding in a broom closet at Doomwatch for the last few weeks. Stephen runs across his father's articles on double Y chromosomes and puts two and two together for himself. He runs away from home and heads to Gatwick, because he's a bit of a plane enthusiast. Ridge talks with the other two pranksters. One admits that Stephen had tried to stop them and that he even told the headmaster that Stephen wasn't at fault. But the headmaster dismissed his comments, his mind already made up. Hardcastle tracks the boy to Gatwick, where he tries to commit suicide on the runway. Ridge and Quist discover that 10 years ago, Ensor had worked at the care center that Stephen was adopted from and must have collected his chromosome data years ago. Hardcastle saves Stephen, and with Doomwatch's intervention, he is readmitted to school, and Ensor and the headmaster are given a bit of a talking to by Quist. We may yet be proved to be the sum total of our chemical components, but until that bleak day dawns, I suggest we treat ourselves and our children as responsible, even moral beings. The end. So, wow, Doomwatch! Again! They're just having fun with this stuff, aren't they? Laying bare
it's fun all the way.
The problems of our age. So what did you think of this episode of Doomwatch?
I I mean, again, I thought the issues were still all quite relevant, but somehow when it came to making as gripping a drama as they have done in the past few weeks out of it, they didn't quite land this one.
Did you use that joke intentionally because of the whole airport suicide thing?
No, I was thinking of fishing, but...
Oh, okay.
I guess it could work that way. Okay, yes, I did.
Fair enough.
I mean, to me, it seemed like the problem was more that there's an interesting issue here, and in fact, there are potentially three interesting issues here, which may be a weakness because it sort of dilutes what the kind of the moral core of this is, because they wanted to talk about, extrapolating from insufficient data, which is an issue. Okay. Can be hard to make that sexy, but possibly. There's a whole big thing there, which I do feel is particularly quite relevant now, which is all about the use of personal data and informed consent and all of that kind of thing. And I'm absolutely fascinated because I just don't know. And I guess you don't either, because neither of us were around in 1971 England for different reasons. What exactly the legal and the sort of norms would be around the way that they were handling this data. But then I think maybe the big one was the one around biology and crime, or should we say genetics and heredity? Because the XYY thing is not something I'd come across personally, but in a way that would have been a hot thing, I guess, in 1971. I looked it up and it was maybe 10 years old, that stuff. It was pretty new, and still the kind of controversy that is airing in this episode gets debated at conferences, at academic conferences in this years subsequent to this episode. So it was ahead of the curve on that, and impressively so. And I think it remains an interesting issue, that, the whole thing of, well, if we think certain sectors of the population are for genetic reasons going to be predisposed to criminal activity, how do we respond to that? But the problem was the kind of way the issue was put across in this was so crude, and the kind of emotional reactions that they tried to generate didn't really feel like they actually connected with the issue. So that was where I thought the episode really fell down.
So let me ask this question then. Skipping ahead in my notes, one of the topics here is also, and it's a side topic, is the reporting of scientific findings. Because Quist is very down on Franklin, because Franklin, a reporter, has simplified science for the layman. And he makes the argument that you have to do that. And he also makes the argument that the articles he did 5 years ago were, in fact, based on what the prevailing scientific feeling was. At least that's what he's characterizing it as. We don't know whether that's true or not, but I think he's being honest there, that when he says that to Quist. And so there's, and I mean, that's the thing we have now. I mean, I was literally just listening to a podcast this morning that was looking at the currently hot topic thing about video games and violent behavior. And I didn't know this.
Yeah, so that's a hot topic.
Yeah.
The link between guns and violent behavior, that's pretty dull.
Yeah. Well, but okay, so what I did not know about this was that the most, I think the American Psychological may have that organization name, but the organization in the United States for psychology did put out a study that wasn't as black and white as, people like to make the argument, that they did in fact find a link between video games, violent video games, and aggression. And so that was picked up by the press and picked up by a lot of people who wanted to make whatever point they wanted to make and said, you see, violent video games lead to violence. But they had to come back a few years later and re-clarify that paper and said, we didn't say it increases violence. We said it increases aggression. And those are not the same thing. You can be aggressive by, playing in a soccer match, trying to win, you are being aggressive. That's socially accepted aggression. My son, when he plays video games, shouts at the computer. He doesn't smash it with a baseball bat. I mean, he gets wound up. But he doesn't go off and commit mass murder. There's no link there. They don't have a link there. They have a link, a slight, tiny show of increase in that it can lead to some aggression, but it's not. But that was picked up, and it's like immediately in the press, it went to aggression, that video games violence. You put the pieces together because it has to be simplified because it's a very nuanced piece of scientific research. And that's exactly what he's casting on Franklin right now. But there's two things. One is, from the meta standpoint, is the TV show Doomwatch doing the same thing? By putting this out here in a admittedly simplified fashion for dramatic purposes. They're putting it in the mindset of people, and they are not giving, they're not giving a paper. They're not intending to give out a scientific paper, but they cannot do it the nuanced justice that perhaps it serves. So are you simplifying the science in the minds of people there? And then second, the topic that you brought up last week, or last episode that we were working on, had to do with people reinforcing their opinions. And I had to go back and watch this one a second time. The headmaster, for whatever reason, already thought Stephen Franklin had done this. The chemistry professor who knew the students from class and interacting with them did not think it. And I think he correctly identified which one was the culprit, the main culprit behind it. But the headmaster, for whatever reason, already had Franklin pegged. And when Ensor came in and said, tall kid, right? Yeah, it is. Headmaster just locked on it. He used incomplete data that he was provided to reinforce the stereotype he already had in his mind. And I wanted to bring that one up just because we had discussed it last time. Which doesn't go anywhere other than just, once again, Doomwatch being pretty darn good about showing the way people really screw up their thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too down on this episode because I do think all of these are interesting questions. The feeling that I had about how the treatment of these issues muddied the water was in large part because it seemed to me that in many ways, Bossing is he is the one who is responsible for his decisions as headmaster. So if he acts on something that someone who happens to be in his school conducting a study passes on to him about one of the pupils, then ultimately the responsibility for whether or not he acts on that information and how he judges that information and whether it's appropriate for him to have that information and use it is down to him as headmaster.
True.
But he is a headmaster. He's not a scientist. And I didn't really pick up on that as a theme. I mean, it's interesting you're picking up on it now.
Chris even mentioned it.
Steve, well, I'm not denying that it's there in the episode, but I thought that the primary focus of the kind of culpability in all of this was the way that Dr. Ensor was conducting himself, because he was the one who should have known better. He is a scientist researching this field, and he is extrapolating from insufficient data, and he knows it. And we know he knows it because he's lying about it.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't straight with fate. And so there's that aspect. Then there's the aspect of the ethics of his research, where he has information gathered at one institution about someone who is at another institution, and yet he shares that information, and even the question of whether he should be sharing personal information at all about the subjects of these experiments with any staff at the school. I mean, it's one thing for it to be anonymized, but he's saying, oh no, this particular individual has XYY chromosome. So, yeah, I guess I hadn't been thinking about it in terms of reinforcing existing prejudices. And I kind of think you're right there, yes.
I was actually thinking that, because, you don't know who the students are in that opening scene where the headmaster and the chemistry teacher are talking.
Right.
Or at least I don't know who the students are. So they're just names, right? So you go through the episode and then blah, blah, blah. And then I went back to watch it, because what I thought had happened was that headmaster had picked student A, chemistry teacher had picked student B, and Franklin was actually C. And it turns out it wasn't. The headmaster was like, for my money, it's Franklin. And because of he's had a privileged or something, I don't know.
It's no same as me. But there's also the prejudice around adoption.
Did he know he was adopted?
I think so, yeah.
Until Ensor said it?
I think he did.
And then, so now another question, just to go with the whole what information you could share. When Dad goes to the headmaster and says, about my kid, what are you basing this on? And he says, oh, that's confidential? You're not going to give it to the father? Of all the people, the legally responsible individual, yeah.
It underlines the impropriety of the information that has already been shared, because if they understand the issue of confidentiality, and if they're saying the data is that sensitive, or they are that sensitive in 1971 about proper data protection, then they must be aware that they shouldn't be sharing the information between each other. The headmaster and Dr. Ensor are not even fellow employees. Yeah. They work for separate organizations. And that the whole question of how you can have someone who is an external researcher coming into a school and not just doing the research, the psychological surveys on the students, but actually taking blood samples from them without the parents apparently even being aware that this is going on. Absolutely just beggars belief watching it from the 2019 perspective.
I believe it's probably not that wrong in context of the world that was. I mean, I can't say that...
No one raises an eyebrow at it.
No, I think that, if I'd been in school, well, I was in school at that time. I wasn't that old, but I reasonably sure that they did, I wouldn't say medical experiments on us. That's going a bit far, but I'm reasonably sure that they did, whether it medical exams or whether it was studies, without parental consent. hearing tests, eye tests, things like that. And I don't know where that data went. What were they doing with that data? Were they sending it off to a government organization that was making statistical analysis, or were they using it to go, oh, maybe we should tell the parents this kid needs glasses? I don't know. I really don't. Or that, I could see those being tied to learning problems. If you can't hear in class, if you can't see the board, perhaps there's something. But I mean, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. But there's a question of whether the data is being used diagnostically or whether the question is feeding into some larger research project where they are hoping to draw those conclusions. But then, that is data sharing. But I think you're right. I mean, I don't think it was seen as the issue that I think it would be seen as now, which does raise the question: is botting just claiming it's confidential because he doesn't want to say? In which case, why doesn't he want to say? Yeah, and I think there's something to the fact that this has kind of moved into a layer where it is about your chemicals, where it is about the accident of your birth. It's I think now, I don't know whether the double Y chromosome thing is still going on. I know the most recent arguments that I've heard for this exact same thing are high levels of testosterone in men. Men with high levels of testosterone are inclined towards violence, and that's, so same kind of thing. And I think there may even be something tied to that. Double Y chromosome may cause high level of testosterone. I mean, that may be a link in this chain, but that's still going on. I know I've heard of that within the last 5 years. But then there is this. Go ahead.
I mean, is that to me, that's the meaty philosophical issue in this, and that's where the drama really should center. And if it had got to grips with it, I think there could have been something properly meaty in this one, because the issue around it is, what do you do if that is true? So there is the possibility that, it's, take a very simple example. Okay, if a person happens to be male, they're predisposed to be taller.
Yep.
And so therefore, all men are taller than all women. It's the logic is nonsense. It is a factor, but there are other factors involved as well. And so if you have some random person, and obviously if we're talking about propensity to violence or whatever it was they thought XYY was likely to be associated with at the time, it's something that you can't just see in the way that you can see height.
Mm-hmm.
But if let's suppose you're picking a random person when you happen to know that they are male, then without looking at their height, what can that tell you about them? Can it tell you they are taller than this person or that person, or taller than the norm, or whatever? Well, it can give you an indication that they might be, but it doesn't determine it. So if there were, just to stretch my analogy beyond breaking point, but if there were some sort of misdemeanor that occurred in school where, I don't know, you knew that the perpetrator had to have been above a certain height, then when you go around looking for your suspects, do you pick the tallest person? I mean, you can't possibly make judgments about discipline, and especially something as serious as expulsion, based on a factor that is involved. So if the data had been, let's suppose all of the data gathering had been done to an exemplary standard, and NSAW had actually been more conservative, but there was now sufficient data there to show his hypothesis was true.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got these 3 students, and we know that one of them is responsible for this I mean, essentially is a criminal act, isn't it? Do we simply use the data that says one of them is predisposed to be violent, so is maybe more likely to be violent, to go, oh, well, we've got to punish someone, it must be him. Is that how due process works? Is that justice? It's so crude, it's a nonsense. That's the problem with making anything dramatic out of that. It's just daft.
And they should have expelled all three of them if they were going to keep shut up about it. And
absolutely.
And I'm going to go back another step. My first point in my notes here is expulsion really equal to this crime?
You mean should they have passed it to the police?
Yeah.
Because that's the direction I'm going in. Yes.
Yeah, me too. That's a crime. That's assault. Something. It's like, well, we're going to expel you. It's like, wow. It's like you blew up chemicals and glass in a guy's face, and that's what you're going to get? That just boggled my mind. But
I'm not saying anyone would be charged. I mean, I think sadly, although I'm not saying they're commonplace, these kinds of things do happen, and it is obviously why supervision in chemistry labs
and safety glasses.
So yeah, and all the rest of it, everything is very much done in a way that maximizes safety and minimizes the scope for malicious acts. But obviously that is something that has tightened up, and 50 years is a long time. But when these events do occur, I would still expect the police to be asking questions at the very least. I'm not saying that prosecutions would result, but you'd want to look into what the intent was and what the chances were of proving that. Because if there was intent, and we as who happen to have chanced upon this video evidence of the crime can see, then yeah, I think there is a case.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting. It's almost a throwaway line, or it's a little more than a line, but about treating these kids like adults. At what point can you trust them to behave themselves in a responsible way? And it is true. We have tightened down, and I admit I kind of feel like you ought to be able to leave a 17 or 18-year-old kid, with proper training, doing some of those things. I don't know, maybe not explosive chemicals. I thought they were like 17, but maybe I misread that.
Well, I may be wrong.
I thought Franklin was almost 18 because he was 8 years old when they adopted him 10 years ago. So,
okay, well, yeah, your maths is good there. Okay, yeah. I mean, in a sense, yes, I would expect you to be able to leave kids of that age without them doing those kinds of pranks.
Although
obviously by that stage they should know better, and therefore, yeah, that all the more reason why it should be referred to the police.
You do only have to watch the fail videos on YouTube to know that humans are not particularly good at figuring out the consequences of some of their actions. Mm. And I have a question there. I mean, would they have done this if they had expected it to blow up in as horrific a way as it did? I mean, I can't tell whether or not the guy doing this was trying to get it to blow up, ha ha, that's funny, or blow up and, you've been scarred for life and possibly blinded. And I feel like he probably was just stupidly not thinking that was going to happen. I think all of them were stupidly not thinking that was going to happen.
I kind of think, and to me, this is quite a truthful treatment of it, but I kind of think that the way it was portrayed the kids didn't have any real. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of the consequences. It was that they didn't understand the consequences. It was the reality of them were removed from what their action was at the time. And I think it's Jenkins, I think in his case, he's possibly something of a psychopath. The consequences that would have mattered for him were the consequences for him, in the sense of having got into hot water over it and so forth. But for the others, I don't think that they had really thought through what might happen. If it blew up and if the other kid was injured, oh, that would be funny. But they hadn't thought about it in terms of how serious that would be and what the consequences would be for the other kid and the rest of it. So I think it's thoughtless in a sense, but it's not being able to think through what might happen. It's just not being able to connect with the reality of it.
So one of the things
because you're in that moment thinking of it as a jape, I guess.
That was my interpretation of that. One of the things I feel this episode goes to great lengths, and I think this goes in with that kind of natural portrayal of things. They do a very good job of demonstrating that Stephen is actually a nice kid.
Yes.
He is fundamentally at a basic level, and they do that partially by having him run into two people while he's really upset. And in both cases, he's clearly distraught that he ran into the people. And this is not the actions of somebody who is not empathetic, who doesn't care, who is violent. These are the actions of somebody who, when you make a mistake, and you are genuinely, instantly, naturally, just, I'm really sorry. I didn't. So they did a really nice way of portraying him as that. And I got to tell you, I found a little bit of his, as a 6'3" tall male myself, I found his sort of "I'm too tall" sobbing and crying on the runway a little touching, a little heartbreaking.
As a tall person myself, I did start wondering whether I have the XYY chromosome.
Also, and this goes to the. There's a scene where Dad is like, "Would you try to stop them?" Well, I warned them. Well, you tried to stop them. No, I warned them. I didn't. I mean, Stephen's very, it's like he didn't try to stop them. He did.
He didn't. And he wants to be honest about that.
And he was being a voice of reason. That's right. And then later on, and how natural is that? And I think it kind of is. But the line, "If I'd been normal, I'd have stopped them." I mean, talk about the ability to turn something against yourself in your own mind. That sort of let's call it self-loathing. That's not quite the right word, but I mean, he's able to take all this input that's being thrown in. Oh, you get double Y chromosomes. Oh, you're a bad egg. Oh, you see, and he begins to believe it. His mom begins to believe it at one point in this story. It's insidious. This stuff.
It is absolutely, and again, I think to me that's directly connected to the kind of the moral core of this story. But I feel we could have had a bit more development of that, because I mean, I totally agree with you in terms of the way that Stephen is portrayed as we learn about his character through the first part of the episode. And I don't feel that this is a criticism of the actor so much as just perhaps a lack of clarity in his motivation as the character is written. But as we get into the latter part of it, it's clear that he is distraught about what he has discovered in that file, that, he thinks he is abnormal. but I don't quite understand what his own kind of emotional reaction to that discovery is. And I mean, we see all that through action. He runs off to Gatwick, but I didn't really understand why he was running off to Gatwick.
Plane spotter?
It's very, very interesting. If that was actually Gatwick Airport in 1971, and it could be, because it doesn't look wildly different from Gatwick Airport in 2019, to be honest. But he tries to buy a ticket to the Channel Islands, so he's running away from home, but why? Has what he has discovered about himself changed his own view of his whole life? And I mean, it seems like it has, but I can understand that in terms of school, because that's the locus of the whole issue. But how does he feel about his parents, who he seems to run away from in the airport? And where does he switch from running away to the Channel Islands to trying to commit suicide by standing in a runway?
Well, not to try to justify this, but I think, one, we're supposed to be of the belief that the boy is so upset that he's behaving in a stupid fashion. That's one.
Certainly, but I'd like to know more about the kind of... It's like, yes, of course he's going to behave irrationally. Yes, of course he's going to it's going to be emotionally charged. But what is he thinking? What is he thinking?
I'm kind of thinking that in 1971, you could at 17 or 18 years old, it could probably go somewhere and start another life. Still, assume a different identity and go.
Could well be, but is that what he wants to do? He wants. I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities here. He could be. I want to go and start another life where no one knows I'm an XYY.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that he thinks, I'm an XYY, I'm a danger to the people around me, including the people I love, and I still love my parents.
Could be that.
But I need to take myself away to a Channel Island where the population of people who I might hack to pieces or whatever is that much smaller.
And inbred or whatever,
He might be feeling a sense of betrayal with some of the people in his life, or lack of support if his mother is now sort of feeling that these things are true. There are too many possibilities to it.
I mean, he clearly believes Dad believes it. Doesn't matter what Dad said. No, doesn't matter what Dad says to him. Dad's written all those articles saying these people are evil.
Oh, I see.
So, I mean, Dad's can't go. I don't think he noticed Mom beginning to doubt him. In fact, I think it's interesting. Dad doesn't doubt him. I don't think Dad ever did.
But he
not
has
at any point.
These things in the
but
past.
He has written the article. But Mom, who, whenever Stephen is there, has always been straight up. It wasn't until after he ran away that she began to kind of waffle a little bit about, well, maybe some of it's a little true.
See, I would have liked to. I mean, that point completely missed. That passed me by. I thought that the kind of plot reason for Dad to have written the articles, 5 years ago, was so that basically in that scene with Quist where he's looking for sympathy, Quist can just behave like a total
Quist,
whatever. Yeah, and and never mind the science. I don't like you because you wrote something that wasn't sufficiently sophisticated in half a decade ago, and it almost seemed to me a kind of removable plot point. But actually, if it's feeding into Stephen's emotional turmoil at the end, it's quite a significant point. I would have liked, and from a resolution point of view as well, I would have liked a scene with Stephen and his parents there rather than Stephen and Hardcastle, so that he could have actually articulated how that discovery or whatever else had made him feel and had made him feel towards them.
So we do have, and I'll draw I just want to draw a parallel here because the more I think about this from week to week, if there was ever a show that needed to be picked up and done by Amazon Prime or Apple Plus, we need Doomwatch to look at this again. Here we have this, which is a little bit outdated science, but talk about everybody and their brother running off their DNA to 23andMe and going into these massive databases where, potentially insurance companies are using them to deny people coverages. Potentially, we know police are using them to track down quote unquote suspects for unsolved crimes decades ago. I mean, this kind of study of the human population is only getting worse. And all of the things that we've talked about in Doomwatch pretty much are still with us, but have moved on. It seems like a show that maybe we need to remind people that needs to come back. But anyway.
I may be lamenting the same things I lamented last time we talked about Doomwatch, but the fact that it was seen as something that could be primetime entertainment to actually delve into these types of issue and give them, proper exploration, it feels like something that, we've gone backwards on that.
Absolutely. I think we have. Quist gives his little speech at the end, and he talks about the us being the sum of our chemicals, and if that bleak day ever comes to pass. Now I'm going to ask this question in absolute seriousness. Are we the sum of our chemicals? And is that a bleak day if we reach the point where we truly understand it? Because I kind of am a bit of a reductionist. I believe we could ultimately gather enough knowledge about the human being, the human condition, the way humans work and process and operate. And I'm not sure that there's a random element there. It's just so complex that it appears random to us. I don't know that.
You mean you're a proper materialist, reductionist?
Yes.
As in it would be theoretically possible to predict anything if you had sufficient data about the system. And therefore, obviously, you have a problem with free will.
Yes, I do. I have a problem with the notion of free will. I think we have the effectively free will, or because we can't understand that it isn't. But it might not be. How about that? It might not be free will. I'm willing to entertain that notion that at this point we cannot tell. But that,
well, of course. I mean,
it's
a philosophical position.
Yeah,
but that's why that's what has frightened people into coming up. That's why Descartes came up with his version of dualism or what have you, because it became important to be able to protect the realm of the spirit, for want of a better word, or the ghost in the machine.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to answer that. I don't think I don't on a kind of belief level. I don't have a strong belief that you could reduce everything and make a prediction. I think that doesn't necessarily result in some argument about spirituality, but I think we are talking here about a system that is too complex to be reduced in that way. It would be impossible to, within the constraints of physics, to build a prediction machine that would do that. For the complexity of physics. Physics is both too complex to do that and yet too limited to allow it to be possible. I don't think it will ever happen.
So you think it's a physical limitation on the model? basically. That we cannot model it in such detail that we could then use that model to make it accurate.
Yeah, indeed. I don't believe the gap there is ever something that can be closed. So we'll never be able to predict with 100% certainty how someone will behave.
If we could, is that a bleak day?
Is that a bleak day? That's a more interesting question.
Because that's what Quist says. If that bleak day ever comes to pass, like, well, okay, but
I don't know.
Aren't you in the quest of knowledge, Quist?
I mean, this is always the kind of question that I think lies behind these sort of sci-fi stories where you have genuine people personalities, the kind of thing that Adams was sending up. But an android that appears to be human to the, perfectly simulated consciousness, is it real consciousness? To feel pain, to feel happiness, to feel all sorts of different moods. Because you assume that the underlying computer, the android brain that is running it, is completely deterministic and can be predicted. And therefore you get into the question of, well, if that, I don't know what we call it, not life form, android, whatever, but if that computer robot behaves in such a way as to be essentially indistinguishable from human, should we treat them any differently from human? We have to assume that level of consciousness gives rise to that sense that you are saying we have only as an illusion of free will.
Now, I know you're not.
So they have that sense too. So never mind the question of whether we could ever be determined in that way, which I think is very much more difficult. What would that mean for someone who was machine, who could be totally predicted but believed otherwise?
I know you're not particularly a Star Trek watcher, but I will pass this on. You might dig it up and spend 45 minutes to watch it. There is a Star Trek Next Generation episode called The Measure of a Man, in which the android crew member, Data, is ordered back to Starfleet for disassembly so that they can figure out what makes him tick, because they don't know. And the rest of the episode is, and he doesn't want to do that because it would kill him. So the rest of the episode is that exploration. In this case, in a court of law, what constitutes making him, is he a sentient being or not? And it's, if I understand from a legal standpoint, it's pretty crap, but it's like, but it, it raises and it sums him up pretty good in a short period of time. But it is the point, because if the same thing, your reductionist extrapolation would be the bleak day would result in having to essentially say, well, what are the point of courts of law and justice? Because if there is no free will, how can you hold anyone responsible for any of their actions? Yep.
But on the other hand, if everything is predetermined anyway, what's the point of even asking that question? Because if we're going to have courts of law and justice, then we will have. So we might as well stop thinking about it.
Yeah, I know.
I can easily see why Chris would think it is a bleak day. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with him, but
I mean, if you could predetermine that somebody was going to do something, then in theory you could use that information to do something to prevent them from doing the predetermined activity that you didn't want to happen. But it would also be predeterminable that you would do that, or that.
Indeed.
So it just kind of infinitely regresses. Yeah.
certain views of time travel, with the view where you can't change anything, but if you time travel, you're already part of events, explore the same idea in terms of how, what the implications are for free will, because you suddenly found that whatever you do, you are still following a predetermined path, and therefore you have absolutely zero agency, and any sense that you do have turns out to be entirely an illusion. But it's an illusion that you can't get rid of, because you're going to carry on acting as if you did have agency, because that is what we are predetermined to do. It is a paradox of sorts.
And if everything were predetermined, I'll throw one more out there. If we could predetermine the entirety of the human race, everything that every person was going to do and everything, then when an alien comes along that we don't have that information on, that is a random element that would throw all of it into complete and absolute chaos. Right?
It's just our model was, that's the gap again. Our model was insufficient to encompass the full system, which should be the entire
eventually it would be
universe,
compensated for. Right. Eventually it would be compensated for, probably. But if there are truly random events in the universe, and there probably are, perhaps at a quantum level, perhaps they truly are random. Physicists, I know there's at least one physicist listening.
Your alien is just...
Are there truly random events out there? Yeah. No, our alien is an unknown factor, throwing the model out.
Yes.
But
so it's just... Your alien is just some piece of information that the model wasn't sufficiently complete to include. But alien is just one example of that. There are all sorts of other things that could be information that the model wasn't sufficiently complete to include, that are fully terrestrial and just result in a discrepancy between what the model predicts and what the actual outcome is. And as long as you have that gap, and I believe you will, then there is no real threat to the illusion of free will.
Would there be panic if the world came to a place where everybody thought that everything was predetermined, which, hard to imagine what that would be like living under. But then when uncertainty is thrown into the mix, what would that do? That's probably all a sidecar. Probably put that one aside. But
I think we've probably gone a lot further than... Quist's little, he was standing on a soapbox at that point, at least metaphorically. It was essentially the writer of the episode. If he could have broken the fourth wall, he would have, because it was essentially turning to speak to us, to explain to us the moral of the story that we had just watched.
Yes, there was that. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so I got a couple little minor things to throw out here. The first is suicide by airplane. Got to be a first, I think. It's like, and not the most believable one.
It certainly wasn't. I don't know how successful it would be. It reminded me of the film Pushing Tin.
Didn't they call the tower and tell them there was somebody out on the runway? So wouldn't they have diverted the flight off anyway?
I don't know. Again,
it's Gatwick, not Heathrow. Just let them land.
That needed to be explored a little bit more for us to understand properly the jeopardy and the motivations there. Again, it actually ended up feeling a bit rushed and a bit confused.
Once again, we have an episode that the plot points turn on John Ridge's sexual appetite.
Well, it wouldn't be Doomwatch without that.
It would not be. I had to go back and watch the sequence where he first enters the episode, and he's talking to Dr. Chantry, and she said, "Oh, you look like hell," and his I'm looking at this picture and thinking, hungover, late night, tired, dragon, that kind of thing. And his response is it's a little plastic razor designed for pixie armpits. And the first time through that, I just felt like there were words flung at my ears and they didn't make any sense, but obviously it means he was sleeping with somebody last night. And when I watched it again and I'm like, oh, he's literally talking about he had to shave with an armpit razor, and that's why he looks like hell this morning. Wow.
Yes.
I would never notice that about someone in a million years. He could walk in not slightly shaved perfectly, and it just wouldn't even, I would not ever go, wow, you look like hell this morning, John. It's like, I don't know. Different time, I guess. Different time. But yes, he apparently got the information about the school data, the blood samples coming from a school because he was either chatting up or something more, the girl who was delivering the samples. If they didn't have John Ridge and his libido, they would have some serious problems. Also note, enormous coincidence that this story happens to occur again where Ensor is working at Doomwatch, and it happens to be both the school that Ensor is working at and a scientist or a reporter who had previously written about this research and who had some knowledge and interaction with Quist to do that. That I find a little problematic in Doomwatch.
The latter I can forgive. The former just seems to me, it's like that everyone in the world of Doomwatch is tripping over each other because it's literally the guy who's working at the school. You come back to the Doomwatch lab and boom, there he is. I don't really see why that had to be the case. I mean, they would have come across Ensor when they came across the school. I guess it was a device to get them interested in his research at the beginning of the story. Franklin, being a journalist, didn't seem to me as much of a problem.
Except
being
that he's a
journalist
written about that particular thing. It just...
Yeah, I guess maybe. I mean, the thing that seemed to me a coincidence too far was when he started jumping up and down and saying, I'm a professional colleague of Dr. Quist of Doomwatch. And I thought, oh, goodness me. So, Ensor knows Quist and Ensor's working at the school, but Franklin knows Quist. What I then actually quite liked was the fact that when he turned up at the office, Quist was like, who the hell is he? And like many a journalist, he'd completely exaggerated that aspect of their connection. So I thought the kind of the chances that he had come across Quist if he were a journalist and he were a science reporter were quite high, but he wasn't anything like a professional colleague. So that was perfectly believable given that he was in that field.
Fair enough. Olaf Puvi, I assume it's pronounced Puvi, I'm not sure, as Ensor. Did two things. One, was there a reason that they made a point of referring to him as Mr. Ensor? So he apparently was not a doctor?
I thought they referred to him as Dr. Ensor, but
I thought they did too, but then going back, the only time I could find it, I could hear... Well, I didn't watch the whole episode twice. I watched bits of it the second time through. And the places where I did hit it, they referred to him as Mr. Ensor, particularly Quist, but that could just be denigrating him. I don't know. But
I put Dr. Ensor in my notes, but I did originally
I've also
just put Ensor.
I just assumed...
Don't know where I got that from.
Be a doctor,
it could be an assumption, yeah.
This is Professor Stallman from Inferno, which would have been about almost the same year.
Oh, yes.
Playing the same character. Dedicated scientist who cannot see the forest for the trees and is focused on what he's going to prove. And damn it all. It's like, it's the only two roles I've ever seen.
It is an exact parallel.
Only two roles I've ever seen him in. He plays the same guy, basically. We mentioned it earlier. Oh, God.
I was just going to say, it's a good cast with. You've got Bernard Hepton in it as Franklin Senior,
Mm-hmm.
who was in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and it has in fact played both Toby Esterhazy and George Smiley on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And Colin Jevons, who has appeared in all sorts of things.
Is that Tooting or
Botting?
the headmaster? Botting, yeah.
Yeah, the
Inspector
headmaster
Lestrade.
who I see and I think, I recognise him from somewhere, but I can't ever remember where it is because his face is so recognisable, and yet he does play quite different characters. But
it's Lestrade.
He was in the Avengers as well, and of course House of Cards, the original and best House of Cards, that is.
Let's say we've mentioned it, but Quist seems to really have something up his butt the last few episodes. I mean, he's really unreasonably nasty. Yeah. Hardcastle's back. So we got our Hardcastle and Ridge private detectives team back in action. Yeah. Wow. It's like there's a team. Suddenly, although Hardcastle apparently is just stuck in a little room off to the side.
Yeah, there's a team and it doesn't seem like there's enough for them all to do. So I have slightly mixed feelings now because it almost seemed like the best episodes that we have been episodes where it is essentially pared down to just Quist and Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Or I think the one with the invasion was mostly Ridge and Hardcastle.
At that point, Hardcastle is actually playing a full-on member of the team. But we've had an episode where it is literally just Quist and Ridge. We've had an episode where it is Quist and Ridge, and Hardcastle he's being introduced, so he's not actually a member of the team. And likewise, an episode with Faye where she's being introduced. So it's felt like through all but one of the episodes then prior to this of the second series, it has been the Quist and Ridge show.
Yeah, that's probably pretty fair. I guess they're probably the popular kids on the show. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. Ridge is sort of strangely likable, despite the fact that he is an odious human being.
He's charismatic.
Yeah,
I don't know if I particularly want to have him round to tea anytime soon. But
right.
Yes.
Well, yeah, charisma. I'm using likable in a sort of, there's something about the guy that you just kind of like, he just like you wouldn't want, J.R. Ewing around, or you wouldn't want Care Avon around there. But there's something about them. It's like, he's not quite meant to be the villain either. It's not like that, but yeah, he's a jerk. It's like, he's really, really a jerk.
Yeah.
Some episodes worse than others, but I guess my last question here, even though, like I said, I'm advocating for them to have an entirely new series of Doomwatch and update it for all the stuff that's going wrong now. Well, I mean, what have they been doing? It's about that. But, my question is, how long before they run out of nightmare scenarios for them to make episodes out of? I'd like to think that they're just about out of them.
Well, we're less than halfway through, aren't we? I mean,
I know
we're not going to be able to watch all of them, but
I know it's like, how long is it till sleep deprivation?
You and Ben were asking this question back in series 1.
I know,
but actually, they've been pulling much more interesting things, in my view, out of the bag for series 2. So I hope they can carry on doing that.
I mean, obviously, eventually the show went off the air, possibly, I don't know why. I mean, did it go off the air because the writers just said, we're done, or did the BBC say we're done, or because I don't think BBC doesn't use ratings, so I'm sure it wasn't that. If anything is crass as that or commercialism or anything, but at least back in the early 70s.
I don't want to look into it too deeply because I want to avoid spoilers, but I think there was some kind of schism later on between the producer Terence Dudley and the creators Kit Pedler and Cherry Davis. So that may have had something to do with it.
Could
I think the creators left the show, and I guess if that had an effect on it, then the executives at the BBC may not have liked what was being put out.
That's possible. I guess we'll find out if it turns seriously awful at some point.
Well, we won't have all of the evidence because it's only, as I understand, it's only series 2 that is complete, and we'll be back into missing episodes in series 3.
Yes. Do you have anything else about?
I do actually have one thing I wanted to say, just because it struck me as being so extraordinary for 1971. Judy, when asked some question about the survey they were filling in, she said they all liked it because it was like computer dating.
Yeah. Okay.
Has computer dating really been going around since
Didn't they
1971?
have something? Didn't they do something like that in the Avengers?
Oh, I don't remember that. In the original Avengers?
Yeah. I thought there was like a matching something somewhere. We use computerized matching to come up with the perfect. Gosh, I feel like there was.
I feel like there was. Now you mention it.
But remember,
it wasn't in the Murder Market, was it?
I can't even tell you it's Tara. It might have been a Tara King.
I think it might be a Tara King. So and therefore, maybe only a year or two before. But on the other hand, I still think the point stands, which is the Avengers is fantasy. Certainly, by the time Tara King comes along, and yet Doomwatch is firmly rooted in the reality of here and now, and we've got a 13-year-old who is familiar with the concept of computer dating.
I think actually,
so it's quite widely known.
It was, well, I don't think that people understood what they did. I mean, I don't remember the timeline of this. I looked into this once I don't remember why, just because I'm in computers. At one point, this literally involved putting data into Hollerith cards and then basically lining them up to see how many holes matched.
Well,
that's like the earliest form of computer matching, as they would just punch it out and like, oh, these two forms match. It was like, you got 8 holes in common, so you two are not remotely algorithmically scientific at all. Just really could have been done.
I love the idea that, in an era when a computer would take up an entire room, you'd be thinking, right, what can we use this machine for most usefully?
And ask John Ridge, and I think we'll know.
Well, yes, exactly. Of course they did.
There is something about the survey now that you mention it. Ridge says something incredibly truthful in this episode. Something to the effect of, I find that the questions in a survey reveal as much about the person asking the questions as it does the person who's answering the questions. And, there's a very clear implication there that Ensor's test is extremely biased without actually saying it.
Yes.
He's looking for violence and he's looking for the combination to make that, and he's phrased it. And wow, I can't tell you how many times, not for that particular topic, but I mean that many over the years in my professional career, where people make up surveys and you could just look at them and go, this is not going to give you valid results. This is going to give you the results that you want. And I don't know whether they realize that and they're just following that path, or whether or not it's a subconscious or conscious bias towards making data that's wrong in the end. It's not valid. I don't know which it is, but I think we know NSource probably intentionally loading it in this episode. So, yeah. All right. Is that it?
That's all I've got.
All right. In that case, I believe the next episode is The Iron Doctor, which sounds really promising. That sounds like a great
Cyberman one, hasn't it?
It could very well be. All right. Well, Simon, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, as always.
And listeners, I do hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol. You've been listening to Fusion Patrol, a listener-supported podcast. Find out how you can be a sponsor and get early access to all episodes and more at patreon.com/Fusion Patrol. Come join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. All episodes are available at fusionpatrol.com. Our music is Fight the Future by Amberwolf. This has been a Lone Locust production.